Welcome back to more Overwatch League. We're predicting the first 2 days of week number 2. Week number 1, it was good. There were some surprises. Not too many, but I think it was a good first week of action. And let's dive right into week 2. Alright, first matchup. Later today, we got the San Francisco Shock against the Philadelphia Fusion. You got a matchup of two 1-1 teams right here. I think this will be a very interesting matchup. The maps that they're going to be on are Dorado, Temple of Anubis, Oasis, and Eichenwald. So, they're both 1-1, like I said, but based on their week 1 performances, I like the Fusion more. The Shock still didn't. They kept their same 6-man lineup for both matches, all of their games in those matches. So maybe Sinatra and Super are still too young. I'm not quite sure what their status is. And maybe if they're playing, this could be liable to change. But I like the Fusion in this one. They, like I said in a previous video, they retained a lot of members from FaZe. And I think that they have Boombox, Joe Meister, Shadowburn, Carpe, a bunch of the old FaZe guys. So they have good synergy. They have good teamwork. They came out and played a really good match against the Outlaws and beat them in their first matchup, which I was impressed with. And they did lose to the Spitfire, but there's no real shame in losing to the Spitfire, and they didn't get blown out either. So I like the Fusion. I think that they take game 1 and 2. The Shock will take 3, and then the Fusion will close out in game 4. I think it's a 3-1. The Shock, they're not a bad team, and I think they're only going to get better, but they haven't quite gelled yet. They haven't quite hit their stride yet, which is understandable. It's only the second week. So I think that just as the teams are constructed, and just chemistry-wise and knowing the call-outs and just being able to play with the people and just know what they're going to do, what their patterns are, what they like to do, I think is going to give Philly the edge, and that's why they're going to take this one 3-1. Now the next matchup, there's some good matchups this week. This is probably not going to be one of those. It's the Florida Mayhem. 0-2 Florida Mayhem against the 2-0 Seoul Dynasty. They're going to be on Dorado, Horizon Lunar Colony, Oasis, and then Eichenwald. There's not that much to say about this one. It's a 4-0 from Dynasty. I mean, you have what most people are calling the worst team versus the best. Yeah, if you don't really know Overwatch League much, but you know football, this is like Patriots v Browns. It's just not going to go well for the Mayhem. Hopefully they just use this match to kind of like test some new strategies and just kind of continue to like gel together as a team and just like really experiment, because they have no chance against the Dynasty. I think the Dynasty are definitely going to be using a lot of different lineup combinations. They're going to be getting more of their bench players in, because they could probably trot out their entire backups and not put in any of their starters and still 4-0 them. That's how wide the gap is here. So not too much to see in this matchup. I'll still watch it just because it'll be interesting to see if Mayhem can like win some fights. And then it'll also be interesting to see what kind of strategies that Seoul tries out. And it's always fun to watch Fleta and the other guys on the Dynasty, Jae-Hong. They're just a ton of fun to watch. So that one's an easy 4-0. The last game of the first day today is the Outlaws versus the Dragons. So this is a matchup of 0-2 teams, and I think Outlaws finally get that first win. On paper and in practice, we've seen this season the Outlaws are definitely better than the Dragons. The Dragons are pretty much most people's second worst team, if not worst. People are split between them and the Mayhem, but those two are pretty much the clear bottom guys in the bottom. And they're, like I said, they're still really, really great Overwatch players, but compared to the rest of the league, they just don't measure up, and the teamwork isn't quite there. The calls sometimes are weird, especially for the Dragons. Like, there were a lot of times in the Gladiator match last week where I was just like, that's not a good decision, or why would you do that, or that's a weird lineup that they have out there. So the Dragons they're in a bit of trouble here, and I think that the Outlaws win pretty easily. Um, do the Dragons take one? They might. I'd say I'd say the Dragons take game two. But this could very well be a 4-0. I'll say 3-1 Outlaws, but no shock if it's a 4-0. The Outlaws are either the best or second best 0-2 team in the league. Them and the Fuel are far and away the best 0-2 teams. So I think the Outlaws finally get that first win, and I don't think it's going to be that close either. And speaking of the Outlaws, they have a little bit of a tough turnaround because they had to play the next day. Going into day number 2. It's the Outlaws versus the Fuel. I was just talking about them. So Outlaws will be fresh off their first win. Fuel's still looking for their first one. The maps that they're going to be on are Junkertown, Horizon, Lunar Colony, Oasis, and Eichenwald. So this one's tough. These teams played in the preseason. Dallas won 3-2. A lot of people were, including me, were impressed with the Outlaws. It was their first real game together on the stage, and the Fuel most of them have been playing together for a really long time. So it was impressive to see the Outlaws come out strong and just compete with the Fuel, be up there. That match could have gone either way easily. But with that being said, the Outlaws will have a bit of momentum with their first win, but they play the last game of the day before and then the first game of the next day. So I'm not sure why they got scheduled there, but I think this gives the Fuel a slight advantage. Plus, the Fuel still want that first win. And people have been speculating about the Fuel because they lost their first 2 matches and they're supposed to be one of the best teams. I don't think there's too much cause for concern there. They've been doing a lot of experimenting. They got XQC, who's new to the team, out there a good amount. They have Custa playing a lot. That's probably the one thing I disagree with the most with that team. Chips had and needs more playing time, and Custa needs less. Chips is way better at pretty much everybody. Custa might be better at him than at Mercy, maybe, but even that it's close. But I like Chips' Moira more, which is surprising because people were really high on Custa's Moira coming into the season, and like his Ana and his Zen. Harry Hook can play Zen too, their other support hero. But anyway, I think the Fuel do come back. I think they win this one. The one thing to watch in this one will be the Fuel on defense. Their defense is pretty weak the last 2 matches, especially on the 2 capture point. And it was pretty rough on Numbani as well. So we'll see how these go. I could see the Outlaws pulling this one out. Well, I'm going with the Fuel. I think they'll win it 3-1. I think they'll come out strong in Junkertown and edge that one by a little bit. I think the teams will go back and forth, but the Outlaws will take game 2, and then the Fuel will win the last 2. The Outlaws have looked kind of weak on King of the Hill, like your Oasis, your Ilios. So I think that's what gives the Fuel the edge here in the end, and why it's going to be 3-1 instead of maybe like a 2-2 or 3-1 the other way. But that will be a very good game to watch. It should be very competitive, and I'm excited for that one. That's probably the second best matchup, I'd say, of the week. But moving on to the best one, or at least of the first 2 days, maybe not of the whole week. But we have the New York Excelsior against the LA Valiant. So these are 2 2-0 teams. They won both their first matches. They looked pretty impressive doing it. The Excelsior beat weaker teams than the Valiant for their first 2, but I think that Excelsior is the better team. Yeah, they've just constantly impressed me. A lot of people talk about like the Spitfire and Dynasty being like the top 2 bundled, but I don't know how you don't have the Excelsior with them, grouped up with them. They're a little newer to working with each other, but they're incredible. When you talk about Pine, their hit scan player, he's insane. Like his McCree, it's beautiful to watch. His Widow is amazing. He's an incredible DPS player. And then you pair him with Sabioli, one of the best tracers in the entire world, and you have a pretty deadly combo there. And the rest of their players are very good too. Like I always talk about Mono, a very good Winston player. He's not quite as good as Miro, but he's up there. He's one of the better ones in the world. And the Valiant have been very impressive. The only thing I worry about with them is they seem to mostly rely on dive comp, especially when they have agilities in, because then they just kind of like do the Soon on Tracer and the agilities on Genji, and they kind of like they just more rely on that than some other teams, I would say. They might not be as versatile, but we'll see. Because sometimes they'll sub out agilities, and they'll bring in Silk Thread, who can also play very good Genji, but is also pretty top tier on the Pharah and Soldier. So you have a little bit of variation there, but I think that the Excelsior, this is going to be a very good match, but the Excelsior pull it out. They have Junkertown, Horizon, Oasis, and Numbani. I think that the Excelsior have looked really good on Junkertown. I think they win the first one. Then the Valiant will take game 2. The Excelsior will... The Valiant, I like in game 2. They've looked really good on King of the Hill. Then I like the Excelsior taking game 4, and then the Excelsior getting the tiebreaker, even though I just said the Valiant's good on the capture point maps. But I think that the Excelsior are just a slightly better team overall, so in the tiebreaker that'll put them over the edge. This is another one that could go either way, but I like the Excelsior. The Valiant they've really impressed me this year. I thought they were going to be more of like a 5 to 7 team, but I think they could definitely make the case, especially if they have a good showing against the Excelsior, of being like a 3 or 4 team. Probably the best Western team at this point, even though the Fuel will still have a lot to say about that going forward, and the Outlaws could also definitely be in that conversation. Honestly, a lot of the teams. I think if the Fusion continue to improve, they could be right up there. The Gladiators, maybe. Them and the Uprising, I'd say it's a little more unlikely that they'll crack into like that top tier, but I think they can still definitely compete for a playoff spot and be better than people thought they were. So that is the second day. That'll be tomorrow. Or no, sorry, that's the second one. There's one more. The last one. That's right. The Fusion also played twice in the 2 days. The Fusion are going to play against the Gladiators. So this might be the hardest one for me. I don't know. Right now they're both 1-1. Philadelphia's 7th in the standings. The Gladiators are 6th. If I had to say who looked better in the first week, it'd probably be the Fusion. It's hard though. It's going to be really interesting, especially because of the maps. The maps make this one really close, I think, because map 1 is Junkertown, which the Gladiators have looked good on and not as good on. I think that their comp that they can run works a bit better than the Fusion's, at least for attack. So I think that the Gladiators do win that one. They win the first map. Game 2 is Temple of Anubis. That one I have to go with the Fusion. I think that their style's a bit better suited to that, and I think they're gonna, because the Gladiators have the first few weeks it's shown that, like the preseason and the first week, their defense is honestly their strong point. Like when they struggle, it's mostly offensively. Like when they beat the Dragons, they just completely shut them down offensively, and they're definitely some of their most impressive performances have been like when they're holding somebody down. So it's going to be an interesting matchup there on Anubis, but the Fusion, I don't know if they'll run Shadow Burn or Carpe on the Widow, but they'll run that Widow against Surefours, and then But I think the Fusion, especially if the Gladiators take game one, I think the Fusion will come back and get number two. Then number three is Ilios, which is probably going to be the closest map and like the hardest one to decide for me. The Fusion, they're going to probably have Shadowburn on the Pharah. Genji's his best hero, but Pharah's probably second best for him. And the Gladiators like to run Surefour on Pharah. So I think whoever wins that battle will kind of tilt it for their team. And I think, unfortunately, for me, because I cheer for the Gladiators, I think Shadowburn is a bit better on Pharah, if I'm honest. So I think the Fusion edge them 2-1 on Ilios and take the 2-1 lead. But then in game four, I like the Gladiators on Numbani a lot. I remember there was a game in the preseason where they ran Shaz, usually one of their supports players, mainly Zen, but he plays Mercy as well. And he'll play Sombra as well. They ran him on the Genji with solo support, and he went up top. He went top right on first point in Numbani and just started slashing through and killing everybody. And they just obliterated the Spitfire. They blew up their defense immediately on first point and went on to eventually win that game in the series. But I really like them on Numbani. I think that the first point is pretty well suited for their defense, and offensively, payload maps are probably their strongest, even though they've looked a little shaky on Dorado offense sometimes. But overall, I think that that payload maps are their forte. So I think once they get that first one, especially if they can blow it up like they did to a couple other teams earlier in the year, if they can get that first win and then get on the cart, maybe switch over Surefour to the Bastion, I think that they can do really well, and I think they take game four, tying it up 2-2, sending it to a tiebreaker, which I'm pretty positive at this point it's always Li Jiang. And again, I don't know. I go back and forth. My first instinct is to say Gladiators, but then I'm like, but am I biased? Are the Fusion a little bit better? I think the Fusion DPS and tank wise, I think they're a little better. But I think the Gladiators have a decent edge in terms of supports. Shaz and Big Goose have really impressed me so far, and the Fusion supports, Boombox and Joe Meister, I mean, they're good, but Joe Meister has struggled at times with positioning, especially as Mercy. I know when he was on FaZe and then when he's on Team USA, there were sometimes issues of him getting picked pretty early, especially if the other team was running a Tracer or Widow. So we'll see. I think the Gladiators will edge it out. I think the Fusion might be a little fatigued after playing 2 matches. I think they're going to be close matches as well. And then going down to a game 5 against the Gladiators, I think the Gladiators pull this one out. Maybe it's me hoping, but I think that these two teams they're very closely matched, skill wise. So yeah, those are the first 2 days. I'm trying to think which teams we don't see. We don't see the Uprising and the Spitfire. So those two. Those two don't play at all the first 2 days, which is interesting. They play, yeah, they play Friday and Saturday. So, quick recap. I got the Fusion over the Shock, 3-1. I got the Dynasty over the Mayhem, 4-0. And then I have the Outlaws over the Dragons. I'm going to say 4-0. I think I said 3-1 earlier, but I'm going to say 4-0. Sorry, Dragons. I don't think you win a map this time. I think the Outlaws they're pretty pumped up to win a game. Then Outlaws versus Fuel. I think this last day, like Thursday, all 3 of these are going to be great matchups. I got the Fuel edging the Outlaws, though. I got the Excelsior taking out the Valiant 3-2. And then I have the Gladiators edging the Fusion 3-2. Oh, yeah, last week I went 3-3. It was pretty bad week picking, I'd say. I picked the Mayhem over the Uprising, and I watched that match, and it was one of those ones where I was like, wow, why did I pick the Mayhem again? Like, it was not close. So we'll see. I think I could get a lot of these wrong too. Except for the first 3 days, I think I get all 3 of those right easily. But the second day, it could go either way. I could go 3-0, I could go 0-3. I am very excited for this week and tomorrow. It's going to be very close. Very good matches. If you love Overwatch, you will love this. And then, yeah, Friday, we got Dynasty playing the Uprising. And then another game to watch for on that one is the Spitfire versus the Fuel. That'll be interesting. I'm very excited to see that matchup. I say interesting a lot with these. But that's always the first word that comes to mind with these, because especially early on in the season, because like we really still don't know for sure what's happening with a lot of these teams. Like a couple of the ones near the top, we know, of course, they're going to be at the top. But there's a lot of area for things to change in the middle of the standings. And I don't know if I've explained this, but you see the teams, the two columns here on the left side. This is one division, and the teams on the right, they're another division. At the end of the season, whoever has the best record from each division, they make it automatically, those two. And then the next four teams, regardless of division, like point wise, they make it in the playoffs. So 6 of the 12. If you look at the standings, I think the battle to get like 5 and 6 is going to be really tight going down to the stretch. So I rambled a bit. I don't know how to close these videos out. I don't know why, but I'm going to do it now. Got my predictions for week 2, part 1. Friday you'll see the next 2. I might honestly upload that one Thursday night because, well, Friday they start late, so it's not a huge deal. But I'll see you in the next video. Hope you enjoyed. Again, if you have any suggestions as to anything I could add or take out of these videos, like I said, if you prefer more player-based predictions, I can try to do that. If you like the maps, like I say, which map I think which team will take and why. If you like that, that's also cool. But anyway, thank you for tuning in. Go watch some Overwatch League, and I'll see you on Friday.